All right, so for this next project, we are going to work on text, getting text on the screen and how we do that. So I'm creating a new Unity project. I've selected 2D as the default. Remember, that makes everything work a lot simpler for what we're doing. I call it Project 3, and I'm going to hit Create. And as this thing launches, we'll talk about what it is that we're going to do. Putting text on the screen is very important in anything that you're doing. It's a good way to convey information. Doing it in Unity is a little bit different because Unity supports all kinds of different screen resolutions, supports 2D and 3D representations of things, and so sometimes it's a little bit confusing when you first start using it, but the more you get into Unity and the more things that you're trying to do, the more you'll appreciate all these different settings that we have. So it may seem a little bit odd because it seems like you should just start typing like you do anywhere else. But like I said, later on you'll be able to understand why it's not just that simple. But if you follow what I talk about in this video, it will be very close to as simple as just typing as possible, and you'll always get to see what it is that you want to see when it's finally finished. And we're going to talk a little bit about resolutions and aspect ratios in this one as well, because that's always like a weird part of as people progress through using Unity, they find that things don't look the same on a phone versus a computer, or difference between the editor and if you build for WebGL on a website, or the difference between the editor and an executable. And all of these things can cause you problems, and all because of different aspect ratios and screen resolution. So we're going to work on that a little bit as well. So we'll just start going through this. We've done this in the other video, so I'll go through this a little bit quicker. I'm going to change my background color to something better. There we go. And that looks very, very nice. Okay, so now let's add some text to the screen. So if I right click and I say create, and we are going to come down here and say create. There we go. I'm going to click create from our hierarchy here. And I am going to come down to UI, and I'm going to say text. And we're just going to say text, not this Text Mesh Pro. We can talk about that one later, but just plain old text. And if I click on that, we get a couple things. We get a canvas, which is where our text is going to be drawn to. And then we also get an event system. Oh my gosh. And so these things are going to allow for things like button clicks and any other kind of GUI elements. But the important part here is our canvas and our text. And when we have our canvas highlighted, you see there is this big rectangle here. If I zoom out with my scroll wheel, you'll start to see that our camera has this sort of view down here, and then the canvas is gigantic over here. That has to deal with different ways we can represent text on the screen. And I'm going to right click and just position our camera back in here again. And we don't want to you can use this method. In my eyes, it's a little bit more confusing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on our canvas, and I'm going to change our render mode to screen space camera. And this type of text that we're going to do might be something like a heads-up display that says how much health you have left, or how much ammo, or maybe a timer, stuff that you always want on the screen all the time. And so we're going to use our camera and always render directly to our camera. So render mode is screen space camera. It wants to know what camera we want to render this to, because you can actually have multiple cameras running at the same time. Right now we only have one, so I'm going to drag with my canvas selected. I'm going to click and drag main camera right over here to where it says none. So I'm going to click main camera, drag it right in there. Okay, and then what happened is our canvas snapped to the size of our camera, which makes it very nice. The other thing that I'm going to change is over here, our scale mode. And we have a couple options here: constant pixel size, scale with screen size, or constant physical size. We're going to do scale with screen size. Basically, that means as our resolution gets bigger, the size of the text in relation to the screen is going to remain the same. If we did constant pixel size and we made a nice font, and then a nice little piece of text, and then all of a sudden we scaled up to 4K, the text would still be super teeny tiny, 12 pixels high. Nobody would ever be able to read it. So we're going to scale with screen size, and that's going to make it pretty good. Here's our text. I clicked on it here, and if you notice, you didn't really see anything change. And remember, with our other objects where we have these little arrows and different ways to move it, I zoomed out with my scroll wheel to find it. And here it is. It's below our camera. So if I look on our game view, we don't see anything. It's just white. And that's because our text is below here. So I'm going to click on our text, click on the crosshair, and then if I drag it up, and then we go to game view, there it is, new text, showing up right inside of there. I'll go back to scene. And maybe we want to position this in the upper left-hand corner. And we want, instead of new text, we want to say something else like, hello, hello people, exclamation point. There we go. And so now there it is. Hello people. Very, very nice, and it looks great. So then we can do a couple of other things. We have these anchor points, and you can play around with these things because as you start to scale your screen, maybe you want them to be, right now it's centered with wherever our text is, but maybe you want it to always be kind of starting from the very left and working its way to the right. That's how you work with all of these different things here that you can start to set up. Just gives you different kinds of behavior. Our text has a width and height, that's the box. And so, and we also have font size. Down here, here's our font that we're using. Here's our font size. And so what will happen is as I start, I'm going to click on font size and drag to the right. And then all of a sudden our font disappeared. And if I go to game, it's not there. And I'm going to go back here. So what's happening is our little box, which might be hard to see, I don't know how much that's capturing, as soon as our text goes outside that box, it just disappears. And so you can think that things aren't working, but really the only problem is that the text is just bigger than the box can hold. So there's a couple things that we can have here, like vertical overflow. If we set that to overflow, and if we set horizontal overflow to overflow, then we would be able to change this font size as much as we want, and it would expand outside the box. So those are a couple things. And maybe you want that to happen, maybe you don't, I don't know. We could do wrap. And now it's going to give us 2 lines like that. But it depends on what effect you're going for and how you want to handle these overflow situations. Sometimes you can just change the height and width of the text box. See, that's changing right there. And I'm clicking on width, on the word width, and then I'm dragging, clicking and dragging. And that's changing the width of this box. And so if you're not having dynamic text, you might be able to just set the width and height of your box so that your text fits in there. But if it's something like number of points or anything like that, maybe you want to have these wraps and overflows. Just to give it a different behavior as it goes. All right, so the other thing, so a couple more things that we can work on here with fonts. Now we can have as many text elements as we want. We can always say create UI text, and it's going to give us another text item here that we maybe want to put over on this side and move it around. So you can have as many as you want. And if these are getting confusing because everything is called text, you can just click on it and then click on it once more and rename it. This can be our, I don't know, time left. Time remaining. And then I'm going to change the text over here to just say time. We'll give 5 minutes, something like that. And then this could be, I don't know, we'll just leave it as text. But I'm just showing you how you can rename these things to just help you keep yourself organized, because if you have millions of text items on the screen and they're all labeled text, it's really hard to find. Okay, but let's say our hello people, we want to use a different font. You can find any kind of FNT files or OTF files or TTF files. Any of those types of fonts are going to work. All you got to do is drag them into your assets. So I've already downloaded, let's see here, this bold, Xanthe Bold. I'm going to drag it right in here. And now that it's in my project, so you can go download it from wherever you want. But I'm going to drag it in here. And with my text, I can go over here to the font. I can drag it right into the font. And then now this is a different font than this. So this is just an OTF font that I downloaded. So 1001 free fonts, great place to get fonts. Bring it in, and then you can change your font very easily. The other thing I do want to talk about, because this does screw people up once you get to building, This free aspect ratio, and I'm right here. So for example, if you want to build for normal resolution like 16 by 9, you can go, right now this free aspect ratio means I can drag this into any shape that I want, and that's what's going to happen. So if somebody had a window that they could resize or something like that, this is what your behavior is going to be. And maybe you want that, maybe you don't, but that helps you, understand what's going on. But usually if I go to this free aspect and I click on 16 by 9, it will chop off, some of them depending on what I have, but this will be what it actually runs when I run it on a computer. And so that is always a good thing, because sometimes depending on how you have this stuff set up, it may chop off your text or your images or whatever, so it looks great in the editor, but then when you go and run it on the computer, if you build an executable, then it will look weird. And speaking of building an executable, if you want to build this as something you can run, you can go to File, Build Settings, and it's going to ask you what scenes do you want to build, which we only have one, so that's fine. And then we can say build and run, and it wants to know where to put this. And I'm going to say, here's our project. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it build. Double click on it, and that's where it's going to go. So it's going to take it a second here, and it's going to build us something we can just actually double click on and run. Here it goes. And that'll be something that we can distribute. So we can, give anybody this executable, and there's actually a data folder that goes along with it. And on any kind of Windows computer, they'll be able to double click on it and run. But you can see in this list, as this thing is building behind it, these are all the other different targets that we might want to select. We want to build for Mac or iOS or WebGL, tvOS, PS4, Xbox One, whatever it is. These aren't all just push button simple. Okay, here we go. Made with Unity. And there we go. There's our great game. And we're good to go. So we didn't add any kind of exit button to this, so I'm going to hit my Windows key and then right-click over here and close the window to get out of it. But that's our executable, and it looked just like this because my aspect ratio is 16 by 9. So if you have other different aspect ratios, things may look differently. But you can see as I'm changing these aspect ratios, the text is kind of moving up or down the screen. And you can adjust the behavior of all of that stuff based on these anchor points and these presets to keep it always in one location. And depending, it's hard to say what is right and what is wrong, except for if it's not behaving the way you want, come in here and check this out. Know that this stuff is here and that you can set it to basically get whatever behavior that you want. Sometimes this stuff is a little bit tedious, but if you had like a graphic behind here that was sort of highlighting this hello people, and then you come over here and you start doing different aspect ratios, the actual text and the images might scale slightly differently if you don't have this stuff set right. So that's just something to think about. So that's all I really want to do for this one. Bringing text in, importing fonts, positioning stuff, making sure that your canvas is set correctly. And all of these are good options, but what we're doing is screen space camera, and we're doing UI scale mode as scaling with screen size. You can mess around with the other settings in there to see if it gives you the effect that you're looking for, but that's what we're looking for in this one. So that is all I want to do. So hope you enjoyed it.